Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for our closing panel of our SJC convening, and we are going to be finishing strong this morning. I'm very excited to kick us off right away with our opening conversation, which is something that has become an annual highlight here at the SJC convening, a conversation with the Atlantic. And today we're going to be talking about addressing equitable care and living conditions in county jails, which I know is an issue of concern for many of you. And without further ado, I'd love to welcome our panel up to the stage. We're joined today by Dr. Kanika A. Cunningham, who's the director of the St. Louis Department of Public Health, by Ivette Alé-Ferlito, who's the executive director and co-founder of La Defensa, and Luz Marie Henríquez of the ACLU of Missouri, who will be participating in the discussion today. And our moderator is Ron Brownstein, the Atlantic Media's editorial director for strategic partnerships and also a CNN senior political analyst. So thank you so much. And Ron, we look forward to you leading our conversation.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the whole panel, we were wondering as we were watching the photos why we were not meeting outside with beers, but it may be a little early in the morning for that. Thank you all for being here, and I appreciate the panel joining as well. Luz, can I start with you? In April 2021, when the St. Louis mayor took office, Mayor Jones, she and Representative Cori Bush and other city leaders spent hours touring the City Justice Center downtown, as well as the medium security jail in the North City, which is now closed, and we'll talk about that later. When they were done with the tour, Mayor Jones said, "We were disappointed, shocked, and frustrated by what we saw." If they went on that tour again this morning, how much, if at all, would that verdict change?
The verdict would remain the same. We continue to have concerns about the conditions in that jail, as well as other jails in and across Missouri. We know that it is overpopulated and that there are dehumanizing conditions inside that system.
Yeah, what are the lay out some of the specific concerns?
Yeah, so many individuals being held in a cell that's really made for many less individuals. Access to basic needs like the ability to have hygiene, those types of conditions, and just the basic human conditions and needs that we are all entitled to live in dignity.
Yeah. Dr. Cunningham, same question for you. County jails, how different would the verdict be?
County jail, I would say it's a little bit different from city jails, a little bit, but not too much different. There's still some similar issues there. I think for me, I've been here now for 4 months, and some of the things that right off the bat that I saw, the living conditions, it's not a huge issue with overcrowding, but just the interactions. How can we change this from a penable, demoralizing environment to a more welcoming and accepting? I understand why people are there, but I also feel like somebody shouldn't continually be reminded and traumatized, re-traumatized by this system that we have put in place in the first place. So definitely, I think it probably could be different. And there are some significant changes and things that we need to do on both ends.
You know, Yvette, when some people will hear what Luz said, there are too many people in a cell, or not enough facilities to really afford humane treatment to folks, and say, well, the answer is we need more capacity. I mean, if there are too many people in a cell, we need more cells. Is that the answer?
Absolutely not. And Los Angeles is actually a great case study about this. A lot of the arguments around conditions are connected with overcapacity. And like you mentioned, often the solutions or proposed solutions are couched with, well, we need a more state-of-the-art facility. We need a bigger jail. We need more capacity. We need more sheriff personnel. We need to refurbish and expand an existing jail, or open up a closed one. But we saw in the early 1990s in Los Angeles, Twin Towers was billed as a new state-of-the-art jail. It was going to help alleviate overcrowding issues. And what we've seen throughout several decades is that Twin Towers, along with Men's Central Jail, are sites of torture, are sites where people are living in conditions which are inhumane. We see this across the Los Angeles jail system. And so for a very long time, LA County was proposing building 2 new jails, a mental health jail. And for context, Los Angeles County jails are the largest mental health provider in the country. Los Angeles is the largest jailer in the largest jailing state, in the largest jailing country in the world. That is what we're up against. And so the county wanted to build 2 new jails at $3.5 billion. But thanks to a lot of the organizing from coalitions like Justice LA on the ground, we were able to stop it and actually move that giant ship in a different direction, which is actually alternatives to incarceration, creating pathways out. Because when the majority of the people inside of our jails have severe mental health issues or some type of mental health issue, they can't get better in a cell. That is, you talk to professional mental health providers, those conditions are not ideal to be able to heal someone with a mental health condition. And often the conditions around their mental health are what led them to be incarcerated in the first place. So rather than creating more jail cells, which we're gonna fill, we build them, we're gonna fill them, we're gonna have the same capacity issues. A more effective long-term investment is actually in services in the community through a decentralized system of care.
Well, let's talk about, during the pandemic, there was a sense that jails were, there was a desire to reduce the density of population in jails. There have been a lot of cities that have elected prosecutors that have talked about ways of reducing jail population. What has turned it back? What has been the dynamic that has put places like St. Louis back in a position where you are dealing with overcrowding? What is the dynamic driving the problem right now?
Well, I would say there is a false narrative out there that is not effective and that our carceral system, our mass incarceration helps support public safety, when in reality we know that is not true. What really supports public safety and increases public safety are the same things that we were just talking about: access to mental health services, affordable housing, employment, quality education. Those, we have research that shows that investing in programs that support those things really help increase public safety and the well-being of the community as a whole. So there is this false narrative out there that by being tough on crime, we increase public safety, and that's just not proven with the research that we have.
We're going to come back to that. We're going to talk about that at length. Let's stick though with what Ivette raised, which is the mental health dimension, because according to Mental Health America, there are 1.2 million incarcerated individuals with mental health issues. We've seen an increase in mental health care accessibility and prevalence, but how can and managing a jail system, how difficult is it to provide adequate mental health care to folks in the criminal justice system that need it?
It's definitely, it's difficult. And I would say it's difficult because of the current systems that we have in place and the current policies and challenges that's inherent to that system. As a provider, it's easy to deliver care, but when you have difficulties with, access to a psychiatrist, access to a qualified, skilled mental health provider to be able to provide this care, but then also you have to think about internally. If you have, both justice services and correctional medicine teams have to work together. So if you have a correctional medicine officer who can't recognize or identify mental health and put somebody away in a restraint chair because it's mental health, that's not solving the problem. So one of the ways that we do have to be very intentional about developing stronger mental health programs. We also need buy-in from justice services. So not just only on the correctional medicine team, but justice services as well have to be a part of this and being able to.
Explain that.
Yeah.
How do justice services fit in?
So at our facility, we rely on justice services to bring individuals down to their clinic appointments. We also rely on justice services. We take care of about 900 individuals in the jail at any point in time. Our corrections medicine team is not fully equipped to manage. If every single floor there was a crisis, then we're going to run into some major medical issues inside the jail. So it's a team-based approach. So we rely on correctional officers and the justice services to be able to say, hey, this person is not looking too well. This is what's going on. And if we don't have that communication, or if they identify a behavior as being, this person just acting out, being bad, we're not going to get to the root. And prime example, we started we partnered with one of the community colleges to allow people access to education while they're there. They can go through a curriculum. And it was shared with me, one of the individuals he got upset in the class and he threw the iPad. So he got kicked out of the program. And so my position was, well, what was it? If he was in a classroom, he got kicked out, Do we think about learning disabilities? A lot of times learning disabilities in a classroom setting, it presents when someone is acting out. They're frustrated. They can't see the words. So how people learn or how they're taught to release trauma is to throw something, to get angry. And the sad part about it, this particular professor also wrote a letter advocating for him to be back into the program. So from my perspective as a health department director, when I heard about this, I had us to take a step back because that was a prime example that we didn't have any medical people inside that classroom, but this was a guide that clearly there was an undiagnosed learning disability that we missed, and we had the opportunity to intervene on. So when we have our facilities, it's not just one person or this person, it's very siloed systems, but if we want to adequately reach the individual and truly address substance use and mental health, it's going to take a full team approach to be able to do that, not just one side.
Yvette, you noted the size of the mental health population in the LA County correction system, the jails. How well does LA do in dealing with that? And are there models anywhere in the country of a system that you've seen that effectively deals with people who need mental health?
So the LA County jail system is not the model.
It's not
it is not the model on
right.
how we treat people with mental health issues. However, we have really amazing work coming out of the Office of Diversion and Reentry. So ODR, as we call it, has been diverting people with the highest mental health needs and the highest charges for years. Thousands of people have been diverted out of the system into permanent supportive housing with wraparound services. And in some of their programs, someone can be in their program for life if they so need it. So this is ODR is the type of model that has really impacted a lot of lives. That said, the county has been very slow to expand the number of mental health beds needed through programs like ODR. So for example, in 2020, RAND did a study and said that LA County could divert 61% of its mental health population. We have not created enough beds in the community at varying levels to be able to do that, but we have the roadmap.
What's it now? Like they said, it could be 61. ODR reaches what?
ODR, well,
roughly.
Right now, ODR is expanding in beds. I want to say we're on the precipice of expanding for another 1,000 beds, but we really need to hit several thousand beds to be able to make an impact in the jail population and actually reduce it to the point where we're not dealing with overcapacity and can actually close Men's Central Jail. That said, we are also seeing really great programming like the rapid diversion programming coming out of the new Justice Care and Opportunities Department. So we have some mechanisms. In 2019, community partnered with the county and we spent a year writing 114 recommendations to design the Care First Jails Last model. So LA County has a roadmap. We have just yet to fully implement that roadmap.
We'll talk about the political challenge of that in a minute, but Luz, can I ask you, as best, have you been involved with litigation or other action on dealing with how people with mental health issues are treated in Missouri jails?
So in Missouri jails, the ACLU of Missouri has been involved in access to health care. So we had a case involving accessing hepatitis C drugs and treatment in the jails. And we have recently been involved in a case involving access to HIV treatment. And I would say mental health treatment is also a problem throughout. In addition to that, we have been involved in another huge issue, which we haven't talked about, which is like pretrial detention issues. In Missouri, there was a long wait list for access to a public defender, which meant that folks lingered in pretrial detention without access to an attorney for way longer than they should have. So we litigated to really fix the wait list issue for public defender in Missouri so that folks could access a public defender sooner and meaningfully participate in that process and have representation in that process and be released and not serve that entire time as they awaited trial. When
you have looked at those other classes of concern about access to healthcare, what's the bottleneck? Is it not enough staff? Is it not enough drugs? I mean, or is it not enough interest? I mean, what is kind of the core problem that drives that? Or are there multiple?
I would say there are multiple problems, complicated by the fact that also a lot of our prison system is privatized. And that adds a whole nother layer to to the ability of individuals in the system to access the healthcare that they need. And there's all sorts of issues with the staffing and whatnot. But again, it goes back to the overcrowding that we have, the mass incarceration that we have. And there are methods in place that we could take to decrease our jail population.
And just to be clear, to just draw on the thread, the privatized jails raise the concern because they may be less likely to want to spend on the care. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
or not, or just less staffed, or how does that exacerbate the problem?
So the privatized jails, they benefit from keeping people incarcerated. They are making money off of that. So that is something that we are heavily looking into. As I think Dr. Cunningham said, if we build the prisons, we will fill them. And so I think it is also a matter of making sure that we as voters and the community are holding our government agencies accountable to what our community values are. And that can be more difficult to do when we have private companies involved in the mix.
Staffing is a problem not only in the private sector. Obviously, it is a big issue in the public sector. And there was an analysis of the St. Louis County payroll and spending data that found that the county spent in 2019 $245,000 on temporary staff for the jail clinic. By the end of 2022, that was 4.4 million. 4.4 million.
Yes.
You said that you want to phase out temporary staffing, Dr. Cunningham, and replace it with permanent workers. How difficult is it to do that?
So it's not difficult. I think one thing, you have to establish a mission and a vision. When you enter into the public health workforce, healthcare, working in corrections, it's really mission driven. What I mean by that, if you go to a private sector, of course, you're going to make the most money. A lot of times when people come into public health, healthcare, working in underserved populations, it's not going to be salary that's going to drive it. It's going to be that mission work. So one thing that we are doing is, another thing too, that when you have a contractor that's coming in an agency, like I said, that passion is there. You're coming to get a paycheck and leave. And what I want to grow and develop is individuals who are sincere in the care that they deliver to individuals at that jail. So what we are doing is decreasing our reliance on contracted agencies, and we had to go that route because of the pandemic. And I will say those numbers are correct. And last year we had about 50% of our staff was contracted agencies. So what we're doing is phasing out contracted staff, but then also phasing in staff that's hired under my department. And the reason being is because, you know, it's mission driven, it's passion work. Yes, I want you to come in to be able to get a paycheck and take care of your families, but it goes beyond that. And one thing that I tell people, you know, when I go over to the jail, setting that expectation, I probably have a loved one over here. If I hear that one of my loved ones is mistreated over here, it's going to make me really upset. So have that same mind frame that you probably know somebody that knows someone in this facility, and that's going to reframe the way that you deliver care. So those are just a few things that's going on. And it is difficult to recruit because, like I said, the salaries are low, but we're on a mission to do it. And we're doing a pretty good job of being able to in some of the contracts and been able to hire in more people under the public health department to deliver the care corrections.
You know, we've been talking mostly about challenges facing the system, which is not surprising because there are a lot of challenges facing the system. But there are improvements that the county has been able to implement. And for example, detainees in St. Louis County jails who have a high school diploma can take courses with the St. Louis County Community College. Talk about how that works, and then maybe Ivette will talk about whether you see examples like that are positive elsewhere.
Yes, I wasn't directly involved in that initiative. I know a little bit about that. So individuals are enrolled into St. Louis Community College courses. There are professors that come to the jail for individuals to go through the curriculum so they can finish up with a degree. I think that is one way to increase access to education and in addition to care. And thinking outside of the box as to, we have individuals that's here, just because they're here, that doesn't mean they should be cut off from living, those social determinants of health. So on my end, I specifically run the corrections part. I'm also integrating community health workers. So as people enter the jail, we can get them signed up for Medicaid. So by the time they're leaving, either Medicaid is pending or Medicaid is active. So that way, once they leave, you're gonna get care inside, but then I have an issue is I want you to continue that care when you leave. What's also a great thing that with my health department, we have 3 of our own clinics. So our EMR can connect to one another. So we can also set up appointments for people. So it's not this stagnated, fractured care, But we have community health workers who can communicate with those on the outside, but then also make sure that we're not missing those gaps in care. We can continue care afterwards. The providers internally can also discuss with one another for a warm hand up. So those are the unique networks that we need to create. And sometimes, in systems like this, we rely on individuals to navigate a complicated system. And I think it's unfair because now we get into the issues of mental health, we get into the issues of substance use, and it's unfair for an individual to navigate a complicated healthcare system, but also a complicated judicial system.
Yeah. Yvette, you mentioned the diversion program. Beyond that, are there positive models that you see in the California system?
Yeah, I mean, a great positive models in San Francisco, particularly on pretrial, which Luz mentioned. So right now, Barry Institute of Justice tracks our jail population numbers, and in 2022, nearly 70% of our population within the jail system were pretrial. They're legally innocent, have not been convicted, right? Legally innocent people are the majority of our jail. What we see in San Francisco, there's a nonprofit organization, San Francisco Pretrial, which helps divert folks out of the system. In the community, the Bail Project in Los Angeles has helped divert many people, and not just in Los Angeles, across the country, and connects folks to services. And they have an incredibly high success rate. ODR success rate, 86%. And again, let me remind you, some of the highest mental health needs, some of the highest level charges. So we see that diversion works. At the end of the day, the fastest way and most effective way of improving conditions within inside of any carceral facility is to let people go home. We can talk about tinkering around the edges. Carceral feminism tells us, oh, if we paint the walls pink and we put in tons of services inside of these women's jails, suddenly it's going to be this rehabilitative experience for women. I'm here to tell you, I'm the chair of the Gender Responsive Advisory Committee for Los Angeles. I track the conditions for women and gender marginalized folks. Our pregnant people are not getting sufficient food. They are not getting water. They are not getting sanitary products. They are in torturous conditions, exposed to sexual assault. There is no way that folks with mental health needs, gender marginalized folks, Black and brown people will ever be safe inside of a jail facility, period. And so what we really need to focus is our resources in how to get them out in safe ways that are safe for the community, safe for them, and safe for their families.
Let me pick up right there on your last point, and Luz, let me ask you, because as we've been just talking several points, at several points you've come back to, look, we can talk about changing conditions, but ultimately the issue is there are too many people being incarcerated, right? We are people are going to be here from Ferguson later. I mean, we are 9-10 years into a debate that in many ways Ferguson kicked off. And we have seen in the last few years clear political backlash against the idea of incarcerating fewer people and keeping fewer people, confining fewer people. A lot of political campaigns being run against many of these ideas. And Missouri is certainly not exempt from that. So when if you were talking to someone who has said, look, my main concern with the criminal justice system is that it keeps me safe. I would like people to be treated fairly and honorably. I would like to reduce systemic racism in the system, but really my main concern is that I am kept safe, me and my family and my community. Is there a case you can make to them, not necessarily on equity or morality, but on their own self-interest about why conditions need to be better and why fewer people need to be confined?
Absolutely. I would say there is a lot of research on this topic about what works in terms of public safety. And in fact, we're talking about pretrial, we were just talking about pretrial detention. Folks who have not gone through the trial process are presumed innocent until proven guilty and are incarcerated while awaiting trial. There is data that shows that detaining folks pre-trial is linked to recidivism. So, if we are really interested in public safety, there are things that research tells us we can be doing, which includes sending people home and providing them with the services that they need to meaningfully participate in a positive way in their community.
Yeah, Yvette, same question.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the fiscally responsible argument for a minute, because it does resonate with folks that may be less interested in the social justice angle. It is more expensive to treat someone with mental health needs within a jail facility than in the community, and far less effective. At the end of the day, the vast majority of people that go into a carceral facility, and basically everyone that goes into a jail, will come back out, right? And so if we're talking about long-term solutions, investing in the care in their community will actually keep us all safe, because we all want to feel safe, right? Like, we all want to be able to walk down the street and not fear of being assaulted or being harmed in some way. But not investing in the solutions that work, like economic stability, providing jobs, healthcare for folks, education, those, the research shows, actually create safer communities. And so even if you're just operating on your self-interest, it's your taxpayer dollars that are paying for these jail facilities. It's your tax dollars that are being wasted. And so a more effective way of investing those dollars is in care.
Dr. Cunningham, can I ask you a version of the same question, which is, you're a local official, you are dealing with kind of day-to-day issues in the facilities, and there is growing concern, growing discussion, at least in the community, about crime. How does that change the way you can deal with folks that you're, does that change your options? Does it limit your options? Do you feel as though there is political pressure on what you can and cannot do?
I kind of wanted to answer the other question too.
Yeah,
I'll answer that one.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Me personally, I don't feel any political pressure. And the reason I wanted to comment on the other question is because
please.
you really need to get to the root. It's the initial racist policies that's put into place. It's the stigma about being a Black man in society. And so even if we have all these discussions about, we address budget, we're addressing incarceration, but until we can get to the foundation, the fundamental thing is that you do not need to fear a Black man. We're going to still have issues. If we don't get down to the racist policies that unfortunately creates communities to be unfortunately incarcerated, specifically our Black and brown communities, if we don't address the drug policies that's intentionally designed to over-incarcerate the Black and brown communities, we can have this discussion all day, but we have to get to the root of this. And it really do come down to, there is no reason to fear a Black man in society. So that's the first part with that question. I think for me, addressing crime, I don't feel that pressure because I'm a public health director, so I can speak with not only just for public safety, but also talk about where the intersection of public health and public safety come into place. So I feel like I'm actually in a great position to be able to speak out on that because I do get great support from my county exec, but it's the realities. And I do feel like as a Black woman in society and being in leadership, I do feel empowered to be able to speak out openly on these issues. Because it's true. And I think that's the other thing too. Those of us who are in positional powers, positional positions, it's up to us to hold our systems that we are a part of accountable for this change. And if we don't and just go along with the flow, then we're also contributing to the underlying issue.
Yeah, great. Listen, we're going to bring the audience in a moment, but Luz, I want to ask you something that is very relevant, like literally today here in St. Louis. We have seen a trend around the country, really, of state governments in red states, Republican-controlled states, moving to preempt authority from local jurisdictions, Democratic-leaning jurisdictions, many of them with Black leaders, specifically on criminal justice issues in a number of states. Proposals to make it easier for state leaders to dismiss local prosecutors. We saw Greg Abbott in Texas preemptively say he was going to pardon someone prosecuted by a local prosecutor in Travis County and convicted by a local Travis County jury. Here, there has been legislation to take over authority for prosecution from counties that reach a certain level of homicide, specifically an effort by the state attorney general to force out the St. Louis circuit attorney who resigned yesterday under that pressure. And there is legislation that they are debating to have the state take over control of the St. Louis Police Department. I'm just wondering, when you have this pressure there, this constant threat of a state takeover, how does it affect what you can do at the local level if the possibility is always there that someone is going to come in and not only undo what you've done, but simply remove your authority at that point?
Yeah, so it is a huge and a serious threat to the rights of the voters who elect officials like our prosecutors to those positions. Prosecutors have enormous discretion in how they move forward with the case, what they pursue, what they don't pursue, the types of sentencing that they pursue. And I would say the discretion that prosecutors have had has contributed to the mass incarceration that we have today. But that very same discretion could be used to reduce our jail population and ultimately improve conditions and public safety in our communities. Those prosecutors are locally elected and are accountable to the people who locally elected them, to that community. The concern with the state is, for example, our current Attorney General in Missouri, who is not elected, he has been appointed, but even if he was, his voters are a different segment of the population, and are not representative of the interests of the local community that elected those prosecutors.
Ivette, can I ask you to weigh in here? I mean, Jackson, Mississippi, state legislature creates its own police force, its own court system. Georgia, Texas, Missouri, all considering bills that would make it easier for state officials elected, as Lou says, by a different coalition, to remove local elected officials. We've seen one county attorney fired, elected county attorney fired in Florida, another one maybe on the brink of being fired. What do you make of this trend that's developing? And one thing we've seen, I think, in the last 3 years is that almost any trend that develops in one state, red state, is moving very quickly across many of them. So this is probably the list that I've just recounted is probably not the end of it. What do you make of what's happening here?
I mean, it's really concerning. We have our own issues in Los Angeles around our own prosecutor, Gascon.
Who had a recall attempt?
Yeah, there was a recall attempt on him that failed miserably. It was really embarrassing for them. But Gascon has been challenged by line DAs. It's been very difficult for him to implement the policies that he ran on. Many of the policies folks like myself and others, community folks, helped him develop. And so that's been a huge challenge. The other challenge I will say is around law enforcement special interest groups in general in California. One of the most powerful lobbies in California is Los Angeles County Probation. They have a lot of influence in Sacramento, and right now they are blocking our ability to implement substantial pretrial reform in Los Angeles. In LA, we're moving in a different direction. I give a lot of credit to our Board of Supervisors, 5 women who are supportive of alternatives to incarceration and a care first model. But the state has basically kept us in this pretrial model that is dependent on probation. And we're trying to move pretrial services into the new Justice Care and Opportunities Department. But the state policies that have been driven by probation have been a huge challenge.
All right, your turn. Bring it in the audience. First question is over here. Maybe a while till we get you. We got you a mic quickly. Great, thank you. Please identify yourself too.
Hi, I'm Supreet Minhas. I'm with Activating Change. My organization works at the intersection of people with disabilities and the criminal legal system. So I'm going to read this just so that I have my facts clear. In 44 states, a jail or prison holds more mentally ill people than the largest remaining state psychiatric hospital. In every county in the US where there is both a county jail and a county psychiatric facility, more seriously mentally ill people are incarcerated than hospitalized.
Wow.
But the answer to me is not care within the carceral system, because the standard of medical care inside a jail is abysmal. There are missed appointments, no standards, incarcerated people having to pay co-pays that they can't afford because they're making pennies on the dollar. So to me, it cannot be equitable. There are doctors in jail.
We've got to get to a question. Go ahead. Get to the question part, if you can.
So for me, the title of this talk, Equitable Care in County Jails, is almost an oxymoron, because you cannot have equitable care, in my opinion, in a county jail. So we need to stop jails at the local and county level from being the de facto holding facility for people who need treatment and not further stress and trauma in a carceral setting. And I'm sorry, that's not a question, that's more of a statement.
It's sort of a question. Dr. Cunningham,
Okay.
what do you think? Is it inherently, is that goal inherently unachievable?
You know, in this present day with this time, I will agree with you. that it does make it an oxymoron. How can we achieve equitable care in a system that we have this? I think when we look at reality and what I have before me, that's not something that's not achievable. So while I'm dealing inside of a system that's broken, I have to try my best to make sure I can still deliver equitable care given what's been laid in my lap. And so I agree with you with a larger systemic issue, but I also feel like today, in today's time, I have to deal with what I have. And there's multiple inequities inside of jails and prisons. And so hopefully I can at least move towards equity with what I have right now.
Yvette, you want to comment on it?
Oh, I fully agree. And it really speaks to the tension around harm reduction and then justice,
Yes.
right? I am a person who's had loved ones inside. I'm a child of a formerly incarcerated person. I've had multiple generations of men in my family go through jails, prisons, and immigrant prisons. And for family members, the immediate needs of your loved one inside, that is top of mind all the time. And so you want them to have access to a clinician, you want them to have warmth, you want them to have food. But the fact of the matter is, I would rather my loved one be home with me than in a jail, and there is no possible way that they'll ever be able to get adequate care or safety inside of a jail facility. In LA County, sheriff gangs operate our jail system. I want to raise the name of John Horton, who was killed by the 3,000 boys, the sheriff deputy gang inside of Men's Central Jail. They are killing our people, and they are entrusted to take care of them and connect them to our service providers. There is no way that people can be safe inside of LA County jails or any jail.
All right. Who next? A little hard to see with the lights, so if the runners see anybody, feel free to. Questions? Over there, back there, thank you. Right in the lights, by the way.
Yeah.
Kyle
Directly.
With the Kerwin Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at Ohio State. So we talked a little bit about how, and we're all going to go back to our respective states, about how these trends of state legislatures coming in to preempt actions at the local and county levels. What is it that policymakers, but also practitioners, can do to adequately address these very anti-democratic attacks on our democracy? And so how does this intersect with the attacks on our democracy? What can we do in our respective areas? Thank you.
I'll just preface, because I've written a lot about this over the last few years, and no one has really found a solid answer. I mean, there are lawsuits that go to home rule provisions in state constitutions, and Luce can probably talk more about that. I think that that is going to be an issue in Texas, which is about to pass a blanket preemption, which basically says that municipalities cannot go beyond state law essentially on anything. Probably the most sweeping preemption, essentially repealing the home rule provision of the state constitution. But there has not been, there's a group called the Local Solutions Support Corporation. There's been very little attention to this issue, I think, at the national level, of the level of preemption that is going on in these states, and in particular, from cities that are driving the economy in most cases, that are the predominant generator of economic output in the states. But I have not seen either a legislative or a legal strategy that has yet slowed down this pattern. I mean, for example, another good example is Tennessee this year, amidst everything else. The legislature found the time to dissolve police oversight boards that voters had created in Nashville, in the county. I mean, they just terminated it. The legislature just overrode it. But Luce, what do you think?
Yeah, so I definitely think that there are constitutional implications when voters vote someone into office, and another entity that is not necessarily representative of those voters tries to disenfranchise those voters essentially by wielding their own power and saying they're going to take over. So I think that there are constitutional implications that we have to be aware of and looking at. I also, one of our sayings at the ACLU is vote your values. We as a whole do have power in how we vote across the state of wherever, here in Missouri, but also across whatever state you are in. So educate yourselves, educate others, and vote your values so that we do not have folks in very, very powerful places who do not understand that stripping a community of their will is beneficial.
Yeah, I would just say, like, thank you, as a journal, not as a lawyer or an advocate, but as a journalist covering this, I have been struck over the last few years at how little national attention and thought is going into this, because it is, each of these fights is being fought out entirely on a state level, where the cities can't win. I mean, they don't have majorities in the legislature, they don't have the governor, and there has been extraordinarily little, I think, national support thinking about how to respond to this and how it affects everything else that people on the progressive side of the political spectrum care about, because this is consistently being done. There's only the overwhelming pattern of this is conservative state governments overriding left of center decisions by local governments. I mean, that is what is happening in state after state, and there's been very little, I think, national attention to thinking about this as a systemic problem that needs some more thought on how to respond to. Do we have any from the virtual questions? We do not. So do we have anybody here? If not, can't see you. So let's ask each of you. We've had a great spirited conversation. I'm going to ask each of you to think, maybe give us one thought to go away. People here from all over the country, if they want to create more equitable care and living conditions in county jails, oxymoronic as it may be, and maybe that's the key to it, what is the one thing you would encourage them to focus on when they go home? Maybe Luce, coming down this way.
Yeah, focusing on investing on solutions that we know work to reduce the population in our jails, and that keeps our community healthy and safe.
Good.
Speaking of things that go under the radar, I would say look into your local judicial elections. We shouldn't just be focusing in on the popular elections that can impact policy, but the last line of defense are the courts. And in most states in California, most states in the country, you can vote at some point for judges. And so look into those elections, get informed, and if you're an attorney, consider running. Consider running for those seats, because we need more progressive folks at every stage of the system to reduce the number of people going in to begin with.
Dr. Cunningham, what's the one thing people can do when they go home to make a difference on the challenges we've been talking about?
Number one, I would say educate yourself and then continue to use your voice. I think Luce was hinting at that there's power in numbers, there's power in people. And I think sometimes people on this level, we feel powerless, but the more we educate ourselves and we come together as grassroots organizations and then also hold those accountable in those positions, continue to use your voice, speak up when we see things that are wrong, but we have to continue to speak out and address those inequities as we see it.
Well, you guys have all given us a lot to think about. Will you join me in thanking our panel? And I think we're off this way, and we'll turn you back. This way. All right, we're going this way. Thank you.